The Buddhist scriptures tell us that Siddhartha Gautama was raised in luxury and privilege. The young prince was given every earthly opportunity to prepare him for the day he would take over his parents' throne. He wanted for nothing. But his parents didn't stop there. The young prince was shielded from knowing that suffering existed. Sickness, poverty, all manner of hardship and pain were kept at an arm's distance, to the extreme that he never even left the palace for fear of what he might see on the outside of the walls. The fear was how knowledge that hardship existed would impact him and his future role. But one day, the story goes, Siddhartha insisted on going outside the palace. And during this trip, he encountered an old man. He had never seen anyone old before. Through his charioteer, he found out that aging existed and that the aging of the body caused suffering, eventually leading to death. Once he realized the scope of how much pain there was in the world, he couldn't look away. On subsequent trips, it said he encountered a diseased man, a decaying corpse, and an ascetic, and realized that all people, himself included, experience suffering at some point. Even his parents' elaborate shielding could not prevent him from eventually facing his own suffering. Learning this, the young prince left the palace and started his spiritual journey to understand the meaning of this life, a quest that would eventually lead to his enlightenment as the great teacher Buddha, whose life has inspired countless seekers throughout the ages. Now, there's a tendency in Western spirituality to view spirituality and religion as divorced from the social and political issues we face in the world. In this line of thinking, taking a spiritual quest is a form of escapism, often emphasizing personal development and individual quests. If justice is talked about at all, it's as a byproduct of enough people becoming enlightened enough that the trajectory of the world just magically shifts towards a better way of existing. And I can sympathize with this to some degree. After all, with the 24-hour news cycle and a seemingly endless list of bad things happening in the world, it can feel exhausting and disheartening. And there can be a temptation to view church as a place where a person can go into the palace and escape from the pressures of the outside world, where we can gather and forget everything that is making us sad or angry or scared or uncomfortable and just push them down inside. And don't get me wrong, there is a place and a need for this sort of mindless forgetting, of giving ourselves a chance to rest from the pressure. But I don't think church is that place, at least not always. There are plenty of places where we can forget for an hour or two. I mean, I do it plenty of times just scrolling through Instagram Reels on my phone. But the idea that one can just look away from what's happening in the world in the area of spirituality, the realm where we find meaning and purpose and hope in the world, is actually quite a privileged one. And it would require a princely level of sheltering to prevent our delving into how much suffering there truly is in a world that is deeply broken and full of so much hate and division. Once the Buddha realized he couldn't look away, rather than running from the suffering, he went towards it. He viewed the existence of suffering as the greatest spiritual problem of his time. and strove to find a way to end it. And though some people have interpreted this as a mandate to retreat from the world, the Buddha himself never stopped working for what was right. And some subsequent schools of Buddhism have taken social justice as a great spiritual calling, taking seriously the Bodhisattva vow to not become enlightened until everyone is enlightened, which sounds interestingly similar to the popular justice saying attributed to Emma Lazarus, "None of us are free until all of us are free." The late Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once put it, "Do not avoid contact with suffering or close your eyes before suffering." He based this attitude on the Buddhist call towards compassion. How could he turn away from those who were in pain if he was able to look at them and feel for himself how much suffering was within them? He couldn't, because as long as they suffered, he suffered. So part of his work as a Buddhist teacher was to work to end the conditions that cause so much pain in the world. And he took that seriously, originally through his anti-Vietnam War protesting, which ironically made the governments of both the United States and Vietnam pissed off at him, and through his later life. The sign of a mature spirituality, then, is one that is not content, to paraphrase the words of Jesus, to hide away the treasure we have to offer, but realizes that social justice is the core of spiritual practice. Here at Horizon, as at many Unitarian Universalist congregations around the world, we engage in justice work not as a convenient add-on that will make us look better or help us grow or get our name out, but because we realize, as have countless Unitarians and Universalists throughout history, that a meaningful and purposeful spiritual life requires the freedom to be able to live it. Starting with Michael Servetus in the 1500s, who was martyred for religious freedom. This is my call to you today. Get outside that palace and don't look away. If you're feeling sad or scared, don't look away. If you're feeling tired, don't look away. If you're anxious or experiencing grief, don't look away. If you're angry, don't look away. And if you wish I was preaching about anything else today than I am, please, especially you, don't look away. Don't look away right now, because the world needs you and your gifts. If you're not an organizer or a protester, you still matter in this world. We still need your gifts if we're to struggle through what is ahead. I woke up at 4 a.m. on Wednesday morning, and I'd like to blame it on my respiratory sleep disorder, but probably wasn't that. I looked and saw that Pennsylvania had been called, and suddenly a wave went through me, and I realized how much of a state of denial I've been in, functioning as if the election would go the way I wanted it to. I even had another sermon planned this week. When I woke up and looked at that electoral map, I suddenly realized how much I've been holding in, because I am tired. Damned tired. I'm tired of saying the same things over and over again. I'm tired of watching as half the country supports policies and politicians who pander to people who want to take away my rights and the rights of the people that I love. Amen. I'm tired of feeling like every step forward brings 2 steps back, because my very right to bodily autonomy is in question because of a damned fundamentalist interpretation of Scripture. Most of all, I am tired of the uncertainty of not knowing what the future will bring and if it will be better for the generations to come. The policies of the people who will be setting the agenda for the next 4 years are a direct threat to the rights and freedoms I and so many others enjoy, and that's scary. There are people in this room, and I know there are because you've been talking to me this week, who are wondering what's next and scared that the world may be becoming a worse place for them, their family and friends. I've even heard talk of moving out of Texas. Some groups that support the president-elect, many of whom had official roles in the first administration, are writing regressive policies and creating disloyalty watch lists to aid him in his second administration. This is not fear-mongering or hyperbole. I personally know a person on that list, and she has not been able to find a job since she was placed on it. And it really doesn't matter whether the president-elect openly supports these efforts. What matters is that the people engaged in them believe he does and are going to pressure him to follow them, and he has given them no indication that he doesn't. This creates a hostile environment for people to have to live in, and it is that attitude among politicians for the last 60 years that has brought us to where we are. I and they are people who don't have the privilege to look away because we are the ones who have to face it every day of our lives. This is not by accident. Since the gains of the civil rights movement and second-wave feminist movements of the 1960s and 1970s, politicians and fundamentalists alike have systematically worked to erase any gains and dial back our country to an imaginary, mythical past where everyone was happier because we did things their way. Of course, this world is hostile to anyone who's not a white, straight, cisgender Christian man. They played the long game, and over the past 6 decades, social theorists have watched the slow rise of a new form of authoritarianism that aims to make America great again, while I'm ignoring that it was never really great for a good number of people. What we face today is a drought of compassion, fueled by an ignorance of how certain policies and beliefs are oppressive for a good number. And I want you to hear these words clearly. Donald Trump is not the problem, at least not the whole problem. He's only the symbol that people have latched onto that represents so much that is wrong in our country. The worst tweets that I've seen come out this week are not from Donald Trump. And if he wasn't here, someone else would be. The point we're at has been fueled by a small number of extremists seeking to force their religious values onto others. If one believes in sin, this is the sin for me. I know a bit about this group as well because I used to be one of them. I preached about that earlier this year. Everything that is happening now is what I heard preached in churches openly in pulpits throughout the 90s. This is no accident, and it is no time for looking away. As I was looking for words this morning, I found an essay that Martin Luther King Jr. wrote towards the end of his life on how he copes in a world that feels like it's not getting any better, where every measure of progress seems seemingly invited a backlash to preserve power for those who are used to having it. Whenever I'm asked my opinion on the current state, I'm forced to pause, King said. It is not easy to describe a crisis so profound that it has caused the most powerful nation in the world to stagger in confusion and bewilderment. But the hope, friends, is not to retreat, not to give up, lick our wounds and hope that we'll be able to make it through what's to come. Nor is it to flee, although, for the record, I don't blame anyone who does need to get out in the short or long term. And let the fire that currently rages in this country out of control. Because when the house is on fire, it's time to call the fire department and keep calling until they finally show up and take care of it. What I'm going to do is stay and work to make sure everyone in my life is safe. Because as long as some are still suffering in this world, as long as some of us aren't free, we're all suffering, and none of us are free. I can't look away even if I wanted to. Dr. King continues, humanity has the capacity to do right as well as wrong. The past is strewn with the ruins of the empires of tyranny, and each is a monument, not merely to our blunders, but to our capacity to overcome them. That's why I remain an optimist, though I am also a realist about the barriers before us. That is the hope I can offer this morning. I have to believe nothing unjust can last forever. History is full of the stories of empires and governments and rulers whose legacy is pain and suffering. But out of these places, like the mythical phoenix, can emerge the possibility for new life, and life more abundantly. As long as you are alive, and I am alive, and we are alive, there is still the possibility of birthing something new, of shifting the world. In the words of Unitarian minister Theodore Parker, of moving the arc of the universe towards justice. I sometimes listen to Hezekiah Walker's gospel song, I Need You to Survive, at times like this. And it's a reminder that we need one another. I'm going to show up where people need me and support them, as I hope others will do for me when I inevitably need help. I need you to survive, because I cannot survive without good people in this world who are willing to envision beloved community and work to make it a reality. It's going to be difficult over the next few years, my friends, and I can't tell you what's going to happen. But this is my commitment to you. I will not look away. Will you join me in witnessing the suffering going on around us? The way of Unitarian Universalism is as relevant now as ever. If we are the religion where love is at the center, then we must not look away and witness those on the margins whom our society has decided are disposable humans. As the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, the Reverend Dr. Sophia Bedencourt, said in a post-election message, we draw our purpose from the call to honor and uphold the non-negotiable sacredness of each and every person, the earth and of all beings, bound up together in an abiding love that rests in the call to justice. Here is my challenge. If you aren't afraid, or you don't understand why people are afraid, don't invalidate their feelings. Instead, understand that they have pretty good news, to be pretty good reason to be scared based on what's happened the last decade. Listen and let them know you support them no matter what, because that's what they truly want to hear right now. Not that they're unreasonable or hysterical, as we heard in our first reading this morning, but that people care about what happens to them. And if you are afraid, know that I'm here for you. I will protect you. and we will get through this together because we need each other to survive. I'm going to close in a minute, but I want to give you a long reading that I read at the choir practice the other night from historian Howard Zinn. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are many, where people behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending the spinning top of a world in a different direction. And if we do act, in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presents, and to live now as we think human beings should live in defiance of all that is bad around us is itself a marvelous victory. I was so honored to officiate Sean and Bethany's wedding yesterday. I don't think they planned on it being the week of the election. They just picked a date. But it felt like a joy to be here with so many of you, to eat breakfast, hear your hopes and fears, and just witness together of what was possible. I hope I'm not telling on Steve, but when he saw the stack this morning, I think he thought they were all going to be concerns. My friends, all but one of these was a joy this morning. This isn't going to erase what's going on around us. It can't. But it can help us find hope to go on. Because y'all, I need you to survive. May it be so.